Analogy of being, analogia entis. The analogy of being, analogia entis, is a central concept in medieval Christian theology, particularly in the thought of Thomas Aquinas and his scholastic followers. At its most basic level, the term refers to the idea that there is a relationship or analogy between God and his creation, particularly between God's nature and the nature of created things. This relationship is understood to be one of similarity or proportionality, rather than one of identity or equivalence. To understand the analogy of being, it is helpful to consider some of the philosophical and theological assumptions that underlie it. One key assumption is the idea that God is the ultimate source and ground of all being, and that everything that exists derives its existence from him. This means that there is a fundamental difference between God and his creation, in that God is the absolute and infinite reality, while created things are finite and dependent. At the same time, however, medieval theologians believed that there is a relationship between God and his creation that goes beyond mere dependence. They believed that God created the world in order to communicate something of his nature and goodness to his creatures, and that this communication is possible precisely because there is a certain similarity or analogy between God and his creation. According to the analogy of being, this analogy exists at several different levels. The first and most basic level is the level of existence itself. Since everything that exists derives its existence from God, there is a certain similarity or proportionality between the existence of created things and the existence of God himself. This does not mean that created things are identical to God, but rather that they participate in his being in a limited and dependent way. The second level of analogy is the level of causality. Since God is the ultimate cause of everything that exists, there is a certain proportionality between the way in which he causes things to exist and the way in which created things cause other things to exist. This means that there is a certain order and intelligibility to the created world, which reflects the order and intelligibility of God himself. The third level of analogy is the level of perfection. Since God is the ultimate source of all goodness and perfection, there is a certain proportionality between the goodness and perfection of created things and the goodness and perfection of God himself. This means that created things can be said to be good and perfect insofar as they reflect or participate in the goodness and perfection of God. While the analogy of being is a central concept in medieval Christian theology, it is not without controversy. Some theologians, particularly in the modern era, have argued that the concept is inherently flawed or ambiguous, and that it leads to confusion or even idolatry by suggesting that created things can be in some sense equal to God. Others have criticized the concept for being too abstract or theoretical, and for failing to take into account the concrete realities of human experience and suffering. Despite these criticisms, however, the analogy of being remains an important and influential concept in Christian theology, particularly in the Catholic and Orthodox traditions. It reflects a deep and abiding concern with the relationship between God and his creation, and with the possibility of knowing and loving God through the created world.